Today's project session, the Future of Art Song, has a number of wonderful panelists that we're going to be discussing with. I'd like to start with Erika Switzer, and I will be introducing them one by one. So Erika Switzer is an accomplished collaborative pianist who performs regularly in major concert settings around the world. Her performances have been called precise and lucid by the New York Times, and Renaud Marchand of Le Monde described her as one of the best collaborative pianists I've ever heard. Her sound is deep, her interpretation intelligent, refined, and captivating. Switzer has long been a leader in envisioning and promoting the future of art song performance. In 2009, in collaboration with Soprano Martha Guth, she founded the organization Sparks and Wiry Cries, which commissions new works, presents the Song Slam Festival in New York City, and publishes the Art Song magazine. She is also devoted to new music and has recently premiered new compositions in the Five Boroughs Music Festival Songbook 2 at the Brooklyn Art Song Society and at Vancouver's Music on Main. She is also an active teacher, serving on the music faculty at Bard College and the vocal arts program of the Bard Conservatory of Music. Switzer holds a doctorate from the Juilliard School and lives in New York's Hudson Valley. Wonderful. And now I will begin to introduce Martha. So soprano Martha Guth has performed recitals at Wigmore Hall and Leeds Leader Festival with Graham Johnson at the piano, the Vancouver International Song Institute, and the Ottawa International Chamber Music Festival with Erika Switzer, the Lincoln Center with Bradley Moore, the Liederkranz with pianist Dalton Baldwin, and an all-Britain recital with pianist Malcolm Martineau for the Five Boroughs Music Festival. Her recitals have been recorded and broadcast for the CBC Radio, Radio Canada, the BBC Radio in the UK, and the WDR in Germany. With friend and frequent collaborator, pianist Erika Switzer, she is the co-director of Sparks and Wiry Cries, a global platform dedicated to art song, spanning publication, live performance, and commission of new works. Sparks is the force behind the popular regional song slams that are presented in partnership with other small art song organizations, and presents its own Song Slam Festival, weekend every January in New York City. Martha lives and works in Ithaca, New York, where she is an assistant professor of voice at Ithaca College. She is on faculty at Songfest in LA, and is a teacher and performer with many of the national training programs that celebrate song. Next, we have David Adam Moore. David Adam Moore is a highly sought after leading baritone by major opera houses and orchestras worldwide, including the Metropolitan Opera, Royal Opera House Covent Garden, Teatro alla Scala, and many others. A celebrated interpreter of contemporary music, he has created roles and premiered works for some of today's most important living composers, including Thomas Adès, Peter Eötvös, David T. Little, Holly Herndon, John Eaton, Ricky Ian Gordon, Conrad Cummings, Martin Hennessy, and Tom Trapullo, while simultaneously garnering critical acclaim for his interpretations of opera, art song, and concert works from the Baroque, Classical, Romantic, and modern eras. Also notable for his work as a projection designer, composer, digital media artist, and stage director, Moore is working in a partnership with Vida Tikkun and is a founding member of Glimmer, a New York City-based interdisciplinary art collective that works in a variety of artistic fields. Moore maintains a private teaching studio in New York City and teaches master classes for universities, opera companies, artist training programs, and artist organizations throughout the United States. He serves on the advisory boards for San Diego Opera's Opera Hack and Austin Opera's Innovation Council, Brain Trust, comprised of technologists and arts leaders dedicated to developing ideas for the future of technology and opera. Wonderful. And now Shawn. Shawn E Okpebholo, a widely sought after and award-winning composer, has been described by Augusta Reed Thomas as a beautiful artist who has enormous grace in his music and fantasy and color. Okpebholo comfortably composes in various styles and genres, intentional in creating music that is diverse, dynamic, and genuine. Okpebholo maintains a dynamic career as a composer including performances on 5 continents, over 40 states, almost every major United States city, at some of the nation's most prestigious performance spaces, including Carnegie Hall, the Kennedy Center, and the National Cathedral. His compositions have been featured on 6 commercially released albums, including his first album solely devoted to his music, Steal Away, a collection of reimagined Negro spirituals. As a pedagogue, Okpebholo has given masterclasses at many academic institutions worldwide, including 2 universities in Nigeria, and has served on the faculty of summer music festivals, currently on the Fresh Ink Festival's composition faculty. His compositional and research interests have been a gateway for ethnomusicological fieldwork in both East and West Africa. He earned his master's and doctoral degrees in composition from the College Conservatory of Music, or CCM, at the University of Cincinnati, where he has also studied music theory. Currently, he is professor of music composition and theory at Wheaton College Conservatory of Music in Illinois. He lives in Wheaton, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago, with his wife, Dorothy, and his daughters, Eva and Corinne. Okay, wonderful introduction. I tried to shorten them all, but there's so much wonderful things that I had to share about all of you because you all do amazing things. So with this first once around, I'm just going to ask very simply, what does the future of art song mean to you? And if you could all just take a minute to 2 minutes tops to respond to that question, and we'll start with Erika.
It's a huge question. First of all, thank you so much for hosting this event, this summit. It's a wonderful thing to come together with like-minded people, and it's a pleasure to be here. I've been thinking a lot about how technology was the driver of art song in the beginning. The piano was being developed at that time. The ease of sharing printed music was led people to accept that music in their homes and explore what that could be. And how in this moment we're looking at the relevant technologies and how they're driving us forward into the future. So I think the future of art song will be the result of all the work that we're doing in this present moment. And so it's awfully hard to define, but it's very exciting to see the seeds that we're watering right now and to imagine where they might go. But in any case, I do see that technology will be the driver, as it always is.
Thank you. Martha?
Hi, yeah, thank you. Thank you from me as well for hosting this, and this has been such a wonderful event to be a part of. I've had the pleasure to listen to a number of the panels, and I think there's been so many incredible things said about the future in those panels, about gender equity, how to have immersive and empathetic performance spaces, and to open the doors to wider audiences and deeper cultural competency. And just as Erika said, by making sure that we are staying on top of the technological aspects. But I actually wanted to say something in this first little intro about something that hasn't been really talked about yet, and that is this idea, well, it was introduced, I think, by Dr. Armstrong about the definition of what we do and who we are. And for me, I think one of the driving factors of what we do is chamber music, right? I think we could all probably consider ourselves chamber music artists. One of the most interesting things that I learned just a couple days ago is that the CMA does not consider art song chamber music, and therefore it is not fundable. So the point that I think I'd really love to maybe discuss a little bit outside of some of these other wonderful things is really just how we as artists fund these projects where we know that we have incredible artistry, incredible technology, incredible artists just who are making really interesting, innovative things. But if it's not fundable, if what we are is not definable in a certain way, then we have a real major problem. And so we can remove all of these barriers that we've been talking about all weekend. But this is something that I am thinking about right now.
Thank you. We'll definitely dive more into those questions soon. David, I think you're on mute. You're still on mute. Oh, there you go.
Okay. I was in the chat window and my hotkeys didn't work. So, yeah, I think it's a very large scale question. Um, and the future of art song, I mean, it needs to happen on multiple fronts, right? So, on the artistic end, I think we need to find new spaces and new ways of presenting art song. And to be looking for solutions that are transmedia across the digital realm, and that can somehow hybridize this with the live experience, so that we are preserving the live experience, because that's what makes art song art song. Because otherwise, there's no difference between art song and just whatever, pop songs. I think someone was talking about Taylor Swift earlier, and whether that's art song, which I think is a very legitimate question. But we've since the beginning, since the origins of art song, we've moved into this realm where we can flatten all of our music into essentially electrical signals. And so, how do we deal with that world? And I think so far there's been a strong preservationist streak in classical music to keep it in live spaces for the most part. But I think it's about finding more ways to hybridize that. We need new revenue models. We need to really experiment with new revenue models. And also to find new ways of moving away from connoisseurship and finding relevance with the larger public. I think those are the things that I would like to see. And I think first and foremost, preserving the use of the unamplified human voice. I don't mean that all art song needs to be like that, but I think enough so that we are continuing this tradition of voice training that one could argue has been handed down from person to person over 200,000 years, really.
Wow, wonderful. Thank you very much. Shawn?
Thank you for having me. This is I'm honored to be on this panel. Well, I hope the future of art song is such that space where all different types of people and backgrounds can tell their story. Um, uh, Narratives are broadened, and I'm specifically speaking about cultural narratives. Um, you know, um, there are traditionally there are very themes, and there are several themes in art songs. Love, death, the afterlife. You can go take a music history class on this, but there are a lot of things that are happening today, right? Um, Things that happened in the past that we need to talk about, that we need to address. And as composers, I think the art song genre is a beautiful way of doing that. One, because of the text, okay, which is obviously, and this may be a controversial statement, I think is the most important part of the art song. As a composer, the fact that you have this text and you can amplify the text in a way that can connect to so many different people. So I hope that's the future of the art song, which means we have to probably expand what the art song is. Uh, um, and lastly, I want to kind of piggyback what Martha said about chamber music. I can speak from a composer's point of view, but all of my art songs are duets. I never call them, a piece for mezzo and a piano. They're on my scores. They'll say duets or duos, because I see them as chamber music. First of all, I think the pianist would probably, cuss me out if they don't get credit because they're so hard. But but no, that's my approach to writing, because I think it's a conversation between the pianist and the vocalist. They're telling the story together, and I hope, at least in my music, that during my long piano interlude, sometimes they're also driving the narrative also. But so That's my 2 cents.
Fantastic. Wow. I would love to touch on everything all four of you said. We'll get to each of those points. Shawn, you brought up something that was already kind of my prepared question for you to start with. You said writing about current events or historical events or something that's recently happened. And so I just wanted to mention, I'm a big fan of all the songs that I've heard that you've written. And some of your songs, like Two Black Churches, for example, deal with really heavy current subject matter. Does the musical process of writing a song or does the definition of art song change at all when the topic is something that's directly relevant to what's happening in the world?
Yeah, so that's the point I'm trying to make. I hope it doesn't. You know, uh, I approach it the same way where I take the text and I sit with it. I sit with the text for such a long time before I write a single note, and figure out how I'm not making the text better because the text is already good. I'm presenting it in a different way. But I think it's more meaningful. Two Black Churches, for example. I did an interview with Will Liverman, who I wrote the piece for. The piece is about just real quickly. It's a two movement set about two churches. One, the um, 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham in 1963, where they had the bombing that killed four black girls at the hands of white supremacists, and then 2015, the shooting that happened in Charleston that killed 9 parishioners. And I remember we did an interview about this piece, and it was commissioned in response to a shooting of an unarmed black man. Okay, and in this interview, the interviewer said, "So which specific event, you know, was this piece inspired by?" And we could not remember. That's how often these things happen. Um, yeah, and so that alone says, we need to just tell these stories. And it's cool. And the interesting thing about telling these stories in the art song, uh, genre is that this piece in particular has been performed at the Kennedy Center and the Lyric Opera, different spaces in the context of maybe Schubert and and these other art songs. So people may come to the concert thinking they're going to hear just Schubert, you know, or Schumann, uh, but they're going to also hear this piece too, and hopefully it can speak to them in a way that they may not understand. They may have not have understood in terms of race and things like that. So.
Thank you so much for that answer. I want to dive in then to follow up on that. Do you notice an uptick? And this is to Shawn again, and we'll get into other things. But do you notice an uptick in the composition of art songs in recent years that are inspired by current or recent events, as opposed to something that's a poem about nature, for example?
Yes, and it's a beautiful thing. And it's not just about race. It's about, for example, immigration, or poverty or climate. Not or By the way, writing about love and nature, and that's great too. And that's why I said we should just expand what it is, and not necessarily replace what it is. But yes, because it's a beautiful way of just telling a story. You know, typically just two people, right? A pianist and a vocalist. And it's a genre that I think more people can connect to. It's a genre that I think, as composers, we're more free to compose what we want to compose, whether it's more traditional or more, tonally ambiguous. Um, and so it's just a great genre to. Oh, and also obviously the text. You have text that can, which is huge. So I have seen an uptick, and I think it's a very beautiful thing.
David, in a similar light, when we're talking about adding visual elements and we're talking about making art song expanded or something that is more approachable, can you tell us a little bit about the staged productions of Winterreise and how that has kind of modified the art form, or has it renewed it? How do you see that?
See if I can get this again. Okay. Um, So yeah, the Venturizer, it's interesting because I don't think, like when I first started doing it, I started it as I was learning video technology. And as I was just beginning to work with video as an artistic medium for myself. At that point, I had been a techno DJ. I mean, I'd been singing opera the whole time, but like as I needed some sort of creative outlet, and so I'd been a techno DJ. I'd been producing and writing like more like electronic music, like experimental type stuff, and but a lot of the software tools for video were similar, so I started getting into that. And Venturizer was a perfect excuse for me to start experimenting with video. And at first, I did it in very sort of small, low-risk venues. And then with each time that there were so few people doing it at the time that it attracted a bit of interest in the industry, which I was surprised by. But then other organizations started getting behind it. And basically and at some point I brought my creative partner Vita Tikkun on, who's this brilliant stage and film designer. And so we started directing it together and designing it together. And we were able to add more and more production elements every time we did it. And the next version of it, which we're going to do next year, is going to be a completely immersive installation that just lives in the space with spatial audio, interspersed with live performances. So we're trying to use this as a platform to constantly evolve. So I can't speak for what impact it's had, but it's the opportunities to experiment and to expand and to go deeper into the project have increased with time. And for me artistically, it's been very important because it's given me a chance to externalize and bring manifest what I experience with the cycle on multiple levels. So I'm not restrained to this little spot in front of a piano and using only my voice to tell the story. I can actually become the character. I can act. I can show the audience what I'm seeing in my mind, and now what the creative team is seeing in our minds. And so, which I think the Wondering, this project that's premiering with the summit encapsulates beautifully, and even in a transmedia way, which is fantastic. So yeah, I mean that's what Venturizer has really meant to me on this journey, and also the damn thing is just so hard to sing, honestly. Like, so, I started singing it 10 years ago, and every time I sing it, I find something new in it. Every time I sing it, I find new narratives within it, and I find new ways to let it live in my body and my voice. And so, personally, it's been an incredible opportunity to get to sing it so many times.
Yeah, I want to come back to that because we talked about the educational system a lot this weekend.
Mm.
And this is kind of a question for all of you. You talked about the differences kind of opera and art song and the way we present them, the expectations of paying a ticket price as opposed to just showing up. And so, you're talking about doing Venturizer again and again and again. What are some ways educationally that maybe we can switch things up, modify the system so that art song isn't something you do once and it's your senior recital and you sing some songs and then you move on?
I think moving into the digital media space helps that a lot. It's tricky. It's a weird trade-off because now we're dealing with reducing the voice and the piano to this like really flattened digital signal. 5 years from now, definitely 10 years from now, spatial audio is going to be a thing, and it'll be possible, probably with consumer level equipment, to capture and reproduce voices and instruments as they actually sound in the room. But until that happens, it's a really weird trade-off because all of a sudden we're asking. So I'm teaching a course along with Vita at Manus School of Music right now, and it's opera and technology. And we're essentially like training the students to to use this technology. We're giving them, you know, an introduction to this, but it's a lot to ask while you're in that educational phase. To be a sort of DIY junior recording engineer while also learning how to sing properly and to learn how to pronounce German and to learn, you know, this massive body of history. But the cool thing about it is that working in the digital medium removes so many of the gatekeepers. And so performers in classical music are no longer required to run around seeking opportunities to get in front of an audience to the same extent they were before.
So Martha, we have a wealth of panelists here because you're all educators as well as performers. And so, you know, we're talking about the digital platforms and all that kind of stuff. But what else do you see? What other ways do you see the educational system shaping up to kind of promote art song becoming its own thing and not?
I don't think that actually it needs to, the goal doesn't need to be promoting art song to become its own thing. I think the goal can be education through art song because it's such a malleable art. I think that you could teach gender studies through art song. You could obviously teach the Civil War. You can teach about any, you could take any subject and teach it through art song. And we have this resource, and I got this from Jake Heggie, and I think I've said this before, but we have this resource in our universities of students who are passionate about this music. And so I'm talking about voice majors and collaborative pianists, like who can go out and be ambassadors for, and who can know enough about one song to be able to teach, you know, social studies to high school students, and you know, talk about you know, what does Heidenhöslein really mean, and why was it being said, or was Schubert, you know, because Schubert was actually a very political personality, you know, what did the music of the Biedermeier actually mean during that time? What were these symbols of flowers and, you know, nightingales, and what were they saying actually that was relevant to audiences then, and still can be today?
So teaching through art song.
Yeah, why not? It's in the only 3 minutes.
Yeah, and so, you know, to a student who's coming to the university system who doesn't view themselves as art song experts or whatever, as the voice, is it more as a voice teacher taking that responsibility on, or is it?
No, so they're not teaching in music classes, right? Like, why not take it to a poetry class?
Okay.
Or why not take it to social studies? You know, so that you are then integrating music back into the curriculum in some cases, but in a way that allows the text to shine, that allows composers to shine. I mean, even though they're secondary to maybe the subject matter in this case, it cannot be that the music would not be a vehicle to open up or to spark something really beautiful for students.
I love that you said spark. It just it was wonderful. So Erika, to follow up on that, what would you say? You know, we haven't talked about sparks and wiry cries yet. What would you say are some innovative things that your team is doing and that you're finding successful in kind of innovating that change in education through art song?
Well, I mean, what Martha's talking about is definitely something on our wish list for future years. So maybe specifically that down the road. I think right now, and this lines up with what David was saying before, is that we're looking at ways to deliver music to audiences that are bigger than we might encounter within a small concert space. And we're looking at ways to use technology to stay current with how populations are digesting artistic output, so that they don't have to leave their everyday experience to experience this kind of music. It can be a part of their everyday life. And so that's whether that be, you know, video content or enhanced, what was to augmented reality or virtual reality performances or whatever that may be, trying to find a way to just be a part of, the way that media has become a part of our cell phones, for example, right? That we're listening to music that way. And art song can live in that same space and still be its own intimate experience. What's more intimate than something directly in your ears? What's more intimate than being at home and being able to hear that music in the comfort of your space? I mean, that's where it came from in the first place. So I think, part of what has stagnated over time has been the physical space of performance and the expense of being in those spaces and the cultural boundaries around it. So I think that education, in a way, if we can make it readily available to people who are just simply curious, or frankly, who just happen to click upon something that looks interesting, then they can see something that is interesting and that reveals something of their own humanity to them in a way that they might not have considered, and in means that are purposefully sparse, right? That leave a lot of space for the heart to explore.
Yeah. So we're talking about, bringing art song to the forefront of education and educating through art song, which I love that idea. And over the weekend, we've also been talking a little bit about crossing musical styles when we talk about art song and defining the genre and what art song is. And without getting into that as much, but really just about musical styles and maybe not just musical styles, but things that are accessible, things that are relatable. Then this is just an open-ended question for anyone. What do you think are some successful ways to present art song to people that maybe aren't as involved with art song? I think it comes down to, topic or poetry or musical style. Do you think there's effective ways to kind of attack that?
Sure. I think that there's been really beautiful conversations about this already in the past couple of days. But I think that the idea is that anybody who is an advocate, I think, for art song doesn't find it inaccessible. So there's that part, right? I think, and we all think, of course, that everybody should be able to fall in love with this art form. So there's also that to consider. But I think there are many other artists who would pair willingly, beautifully, happily in a concert space that are not in our genre, where the two can illuminate the other. The one can illuminate the other. We've had really. I think five years ago, David and I both had the pleasure of going to school with Rhiannon Giddens, and she came and gave a concert for us a number of years ago, and that was spectacular because she was singing art song to precisely an audience that likely hadn't heard her sing that music very specifically. And so that's another way that there are these very special artists that can straddle more than one world. And so that's another way I think that it can work. But Erika and I have commissioned pieces, folk music pieces in art song, Bob Dylan, for example, Joni Mitchell, those kinds of things.
Yeah. I think it's funny because I'm a composer and I keep talking about text. Yeah, also, what if you're speaking the language? And I'm not talking about just speaking English. I mean the language. I'm from Kentucky. We speak a certain language, right? There are certain parts of the country that speaks a certain types. Their language is different, and so. You mentioned folk music, so pair the actual what they're used to hearing, with maybe music that they're not used to hearing together. I mean, I think that can go a long way, and vice versa. Music that they're used to hearing with language that they're not used to hearing. So.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And I like what you said earlier, Shawn, about, you know, putting Schubert on a recital with some things that are new, you know, and so maybe a viewer is going to come to hear their favorite composer. For example, it made me think of when Brownlee came to DePaul, about an hour west or so of Bloomington, what was right before the pandemic, really. And I went to hear Dichterliebe because who wouldn't want to hear Lawrence Brownlee sing Dichterliebe? And then he did Cycles of My Being by Taishan Sori, and it was just absolutely incredible and eye-opening. I mean, it was easily my favorite thing on the recital over Dichterliebe. And so how do we instill that? How do we bring that message to artists that are not as active in art song? It seems like, you know, we have such a wealth here. How do we instill that in our educational system?
Can I say one more thing, not to take over? Well, your last point I was going to make, that should be taught early, that it's okay for your senior recital to sing, you know, again, Schubert, and then, you know, a piece that is totally current. It was written 5 minutes ago. So I think if we're taught that it's okay to do that, then, you know, when these students become professional, they'll say it's okay to do that, you know. So yeah.
I think people in classical music tend to forget that Schubert, for instance, Schubert and his whole crew were super into contemporary music. You know what I mean? Like, they weren't sitting around playing Monteverdi all day. Like, they were like hardcore contemporary music nerds. Mozart running all around Vienna doing contemporary music, bleeding edge stuff that was so hard to play. You look at most any composer of influence throughout, you know, this sort of, you know, Western classical music culture, and, you know, they were doing something that was interesting that other people were not doing. They didn't have this preservationist streak, and a lot of them blended genres. And, you know, if you really look at you know, their music through a contemporary lens in terms of, you know, the types of poetry they were using, the types of subject matter. Marriage of Figaro, it premiered in 1786 as an adaptation of a play that had been only written 2 years before and had been banned in parts of Europe. So it was an absolutely politically hot button issue, and nowadays it takes operas so long just to get off the damn ground, that it's hard to imagine something like that even happening now. You know, imagine an opera about George Floyd premiering like next year. You know, this is the kind of thing we're talking about. So, you know, I think it's something that's really important for us to remember, and particularly when we're talking about genre, and to think about how many composers have been very fluid with different genres, and you know, probably so, and many of them didn't see firm divisions between classical music and non-classical music. And we do see a lot of that happening today, particularly in America, and this whole renaissance of contemporary American music that's been happening over the past decade. We see a whole lot of sort of genre flexible and pop music friendly composers happening.
Sure. Erika, I have a question for you. So this is just to go along with everything we've been talking about, but if you had to pick one song or set or chamber music type piece that is newer, that you've performed, that really spoke to you about the future of art song, what would you say?
Well, I'm just going to go ahead and repeat myself, also because it's a Sparks production and I'm proud of the work that we've done this year. But the Ramadan 20 versus COVID-19, that music that you heard as you entered the room today was written by Andrew Stanneland to bring to life the words of Jessica Care Moore, or I shouldn't even say bring to life. Her music, her words are entirely full of life, but that brought it to music. And I think that piece was devastating to see come together in the way that it did, because it caught us all in a moment of pain and vulnerability, and in a position of being in deep need of healing, and to be able to reach out to each other in this moment and feel connected despite all the divisions. And so I think that any piece of music that can catch you off guard and take your breath away, it needs to keep being heard, but we also need to keep finding those moments and finding ways to capture them right away in the words of a living poet and the music of a living composer. And that's where the vitality is. I think audiences respond, like you're talking about, to a new piece. I saw a question in the chat: what do we do about audiences, coming to expect that kind of oldie moldy program of those same 5 songs on repeat? I think we have to get on the stage and we have to knock it out of the park with music that was written right now and that we fully understand, because we are of this moment, and we don't have to learn 5 layers of history to live in that song, in that moment, but we can simply own it because it is of us. And I think that's where the power is, to reach an audience, and they will understand whether or not they have a musical education, because they are of this moment too, and those sounds are referential to all kinds of things outside of classical music boundaries. So I think I'm so off topic now, but
Oh, you're right on topic.
but yeah. So I love this piece very, very much. I think it's spectacular.
Yeah. So telling stories. I mean, we're storytellers, right? And telling stories about what's happening. I think that's super powerful. Alain had a question here that I think relates back to what we were talking about with musical styles. So still staying within the genre of art song, but the kind of transition of music styles between jazz, which we were talking about earlier, and other styles of music. Do art song musicians need to be educated in these other genres or styles of music to then be able to kind of combine and maybe work on some projects that are syncretic with other genres as well, or other styles of music?
Yes. If you're going to risk doing it, then yes. I think that, and we never stop learning, right? I mean, none of us in this industry, but I think that very specifically, identity also comes into play with this as well. And so I think you can have these kind of, so if you're going to cross genre, I think the easiest place for it to come from is your identity in that sense, and like, so stories that come from your culture, your now, what your truth is, what your authentic place is. And so if that's the music you grew up with, and if that's different than art song, then by all, yeah, of course. And it's not to say that can't be learned. I mean, we all, I think, probably adopted German lieder in a sense, right? This is not the music of the United States, but yeah, of course you need to learn.
Anyone else have a thought on that? Sherry asks, why not collaborate with those who specialize in that other style or genre? And this is an interesting question. I think we should. First of all, I'm just going to give my thought. But I also have heard, I have never heard this piece, and I don't know what it's called, but apparently Willie Nelson wrote an art song cycle I've heard in my past. I don't know if that's true, but does anyone have any thoughts on that? Why not collaborate with those who specialize in another style?
I mean, I'm a bit thrown by the question at all, honestly, because it just seems like if you want to bring something special or unique in any way to what you're doing, as a creator of music, as an interpreter of music, you have to pull your influences from outside of that, especially in classical music, this extremely strict, rigid sort of, craft that we're in. You have to pull your influences from outside of that, and so I think it's so important that we all be as open as possible to whatever it is that moves us, whether it's drum and bass, hip hop, maybe even something that's not music, maybe it's, I don't know, astrophysics or basket weaving or something, but we need to be like absolutely open to whatever it is that moves us, and then bring that energy into what we do. We need to bring the truths that we learn from all of our experience, no matter what it is, into the music that we make and the performances we give, the music we write.
Yeah, and I have a follow up on that, David, because I was actually going to ask you earlier, and I think it goes into the discussion we're having about Winterreise and the differences that brought from what you wanted to see happen, what you were visualizing. And so, as somebody who switches a lot between opera and song, what are the ways that are different in preparing and performing opera versus song, and how do you think that's changing as a result of bringing song to a newer kind of platform?
I don't think there's a difference, honestly. I think the truth that you bring is the truth that you bring. It's the truth is run through the conduit of technical skill, in order to kind of fall within one sort of creative output or the other. Uh, but when you're interpreting, so as a singer, for instance, if you're interpreting an operatic role, you're bringing the same emotional energy to it. You're bringing the same sort of technical concentration. You should be bringing the same raw material to it. It's just channeled through. It's channeled into something that maybe is happening on a longer scale. Um, and then of course, some theaters are larger than others. Some instrumentation is more dense than other instrumentation. So, but these are all little technical things that we have to kind of navigate and allow for. But they don't make any like substantive difference in what we're bringing to the game, and the mindset that we're in. At the end of the day, we're all artists, and we're all trying to bring some kind of truth from our experience to other people in order to change their frame of reference and move them or amuse them in some way.
That's a very encouraging answer. It makes me feel good about launching into both singing, song, and opera. And I'm sure there's another number of other people on the call who feel that way. Makobi has a great question for everyone. Any advice, and he kind of beat me to it, but any advice for students who want to commission art songs?
Do it, right? We've never, Martha and I have done this a few times, and it's, I mean, we did this a few times when we were basically still students, and no one ever said no, I mean, we cobbled together money however we did that, whether we applied for grants or whether we just gave them our money because we wanted to perform their music. We live in such a generous community, and there's always such support for opportunities. So if you have a student recital, or if you have a professional opportunity to present, find a way to do it. You can even crowdsource that money or do whatever you need to do. I'm sure that there's, I'm Canadian by birth, and I still remain a little bit behind on following all of the funding paths in the United States. And so I can't tell you to go to Canada Council for the money, but I'm sure that ASCAP or some other programs have that availability. But just ask.
Yeah,
just ask.
Yeah, and I think you need to be creative too. Two things with that. As a student, you should be working with your colleagues as students. I tell my students, don't write for Yo-Yo Ma, write for the next Yo-Yo Ma. So many of my big opportunities have happened as when I collaborated with people from my CCN days who are like singing Aida at the Met, right? When we were just like grad students together. And even professionally, Two Black Churches, that's become hugely popular, which I'm grateful for. Will Liverman commissioned me to do that piece. But do you know what his payment was? I said, Will, how about you sing on my new album, and I'll write you this piece for this album. And it's like, and it was a great trade-off. And so I'm gonna have a killer album with Will on it, and then this piece he recorded it, and it's been reviewed by like everywhere, New York Times, Washington Post, and it's one of those things where it was a creative commission. And we weren't using each other. We both valued each other's art, and we were friends, and we made great music together. And so, one, be creative, but also start. Now, I'm actually obviously I'm at a different place than you, being a professional. But I tell students, you need to be writing for the next Yo Ma or the next, you know, you know, world class singer at the Met. Who's sitting next to you in oral skills that you both hate. So yeah.
I just want to add one little thing. The very first commission, I think or bigger-ish commission that I asked a composer to write, I was waiting tables. I picked up Saturday nights, and that's how I paid for it. So, I mean, I like had my days that I worked. I picked up one other day. I coupled it together. And that's why that music is alive. And I would thank my people that I waited on. They never knew that they were paying for art song.
I think our songs, if I can jump in, our Song Slam events have fostered that kind of community too, bringing teams together, singers, pianists, poets, composers, to bring something. And it's like Martha says, short, it's 3 minutes, come on. And they throw that song together and perform it, and you have this audience and you have this enthusiasm and this energy. And that's a great way to have a seed, and that can easily grow into a full-blown project.
Yeah, and I think in reference to what you were saying, Shawn, find your artistic soulmates or your artistic playmates, as early as possible. You never know what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. Martha and I, we went to Oberlin together, and we were friends then. We weren't like best friends, but we were friends, and we kept in touch very sporadically as our careers developed and such. And it was just a few years ago that we got back together and started collaborating with things. And through that, one of the more exciting projects that I've gotten to do has happened through Sparks and Wiry Cries, in which I actually got to try this idea and commission my favorite composer, and we did a piece with electronic accompaniment that was accompanying an unamplified voice. And so we got to embed this really interesting acoustical, or rather electroacoustic experiment within the premiere of the work itself. And it actually worked out. And so now from here on out, we're going to be building on the ideas that we developed in that piece. And it was incredibly rewarding. And yeah, but I mean, we've known each other since we were like teenagers.
Well, thank you for all those thoughts. I think that was a really well detailed answer to Makovi's question about commissioning art songs. Really great comment here in the chat from Margaret. Thank you, Margaret. That's very, very thoughtful. Jennifer, did you want to unmute to ask your question? I know we're getting close to time, but I would love to hear what you have.
And I also think Miss Vera has had her hand up for a while too, so maybe.
Oh, I did not see the two. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to unmute Vera and ask your question?
Yes. Actually, it's a little comment because what you all talking about, it's so dear to me. Thank you so much. It's absolutely fantastic. First class, first rate symposium. And, we could go on not for one weekend, but every weekend of the year. Just a few comments. I was for 30 years doing, by my accent, you understand that I'm Russian. I came from Moscow. Anyway, 30 years at Peabody, different experience, different people with different cultural background. Two moments I would love to emphasize as maybe a little, not advice, but just my feelings. We, as the teachers, as educators, are dealing with young generation. And what is a little bit lesser and lesser over these years is a curiosity of reading, curiosity of just exploring the new unknown. That's a scare. Okay, I don't know, I don't want to know. So we all, I guess, should have to ignite that curiosity of this phenomenal genre. Moment number two is the opera singers and great people, great artists are sort of passing on something which I disagree with, but who am I to be disagree? But opera first, my life as career as an opera singer, and then when my voice and I will get older, I will start singing the art songs. Did we all heard those moments? Yes, exactly. So the career wise, and you know, that is what is missing. It's chamber music. It's all my life. Never regretted, you know, stop playing the solo repertoire, you know, and as I say, it's a beautiful profession to be a collaborative pianist. Phenomenal. And chamber music is remind me of Rachmaninoff, you know, two beautiful opus 33 and 39 of etude tableau. And that's what every song is. It is an etude tableau. It is the picture written for two instruments or three or four, doesn't really matter, but it is a chamber music, an approach to the voice and intelligence of all this. I think it's very important for us as an educator. And to end up, I should say that with all my experience, and especially after 16 years ago, I started Russian Chamber Art Society, and my goal is to get American audience familiar with this phenomenal, endless repertoire of Russian romances, which means Russian art songs. You know, we can go on and on and on, but, and the last maybe question to all of you, what is your point of view on writing, to expand your poetical sort of field, writing on poetry of other poets all over the world? It's still tradition in writing, you know, for Russian composers, and most contemporary, even Sonia Gubaidulina and Snitsky. So there were, or Denisov. So, you know, we are not only what we experience here, because the problems are the same, you know, and we cry the same tears and we laugh the same laugh. So that would be actually, you know, my dream for the future. And so that's what I wanted to say. And my deepest gratitude to all of you for organizing, for speaking, for sharing your life with us. Thank you all.
Thank you, Vera. Thank you, Vera. I'm going to put in the email, in the chat here, the email of one of our student panelists from Friday evening, last night, my good colleague who works with a lot of Russian song, and I want you two to connect. So I'm going to put her email in the chat here. But as a final question to you all, how do we engage with poetry from other countries and other cultures?
If you're asking me, it's quite easy, because the world literature is open to all of us in translations to all and every possible and impossible language. Just curious, be curious. Young people, get curious, open up the new territories.
Vera's absolutely right. We have to be curious, and we have to be grateful for these incredibly beautifully crafted windows into other cultures. It's such a beautiful way to get to know, to understand with depth another person's experience, and how else can we move forward in this moment but to have that curiosity.
Thank you.
I really believe that curiosity is the most valuable asset that anyone can have, especially if you want to contribute to human culture in some way. Curiosity is more important than well, okay, didn't Einstein say this or something? Curiosity is more important than knowledge, but it's also more important than intelligence, than motivation. Your curiosity is the most powerful currency you have.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. I don't know, I can't add to anything, you know, to that what Ms. Vera said, but just go ahead and do it. Just make friends, engage. Some people said in the chat, learn the language. I don't know if that's necessarily totally necessary, but it'd be nice if you can. But sometimes just meeting someone from cultures, and you know, My dad speaks a different language. I can't speak his language, and I'm always engaging him. What is this? The Ishan language, which is our tribal language, is very poetic. And so he would tell me, he'll say a little meaning, but then he'll say what it actually means. I'm like, that's amazing to have a language that's that poetic. That you literally, it means something that you're actually different than you're actually saying. My point is just engage people of different cultures and ask them, have them speak it so you can write the rhythm down, right? If you're a composer, what does it mean to you? What does it mean culturally? Talk about the historical background. You know, you know, they write music. So.
Imagine how rich our art song could really become by pulling from this kind of cultural amazingness, but from everywhere around the world. We've been so limited for so long. And it has been, it is rich, but I mean, imagine how much more there is to explore.
Well, that's just wonderful. Sorry, I couldn't remember if everyone had had a chance to respond. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I think that this conversation could go on and on and on. And I'm so thankful for each of you coming on as panelists today and discussing the future of art song. I think we've really touched on a number of key issues here that I think need to be addressed. And I really am just overjoyed by all of our wonderful participants and everyone showing up and having questions. And so just thank you all so much. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Spencer, for helping us through the last hour, which is absolutely remarkable. Absolutely remarkable. What a great conversation. And one of the thoughts that I had all the way through was this tension between emulating the past and creating the future, and how we find ourselves sort of leaning in both directions, and sometimes more one direction more than the other. So much of what you've spoken about is this idea of leaning into the future, leaning into creating music rather than simply focusing on repeating and emulating what we've seen in the past. And we can take the past into that future with us in a really authentic way. But it's you're also incredibly inspiring in how you have articulated that in your own particular ways. So thank you so much.